Good morning, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in. I want to start today by showing how you, with just maybe a phone call or an email, can actually have a huge effect in terms of what some companies and what some political parties are doing. We're going to also be looking at Iran, of course, what's going on there, some remarkable breakthroughs in Canada relative to, or it looks like remarkable spacecraft and space travel. And hey, have they found Noah's Ark? Stay tuned for all of this right now. Usually I open up with international or U.S., bring it back to Canada and look around the world. I want to just say something to lead off with here today because it's going to come up later in the podcast. There's a very disturbing story, and it's coming out, the Rebel News, if you've not heard of them, from Canada. I say that to our U.S. viewers. Has reported on this, and there was a case in January, apparently, in Lethbridge, Alberta, where a hotel room was, in fact, some police officers broke in to do an arrest there, and a gentleman, his last name is Singh, S-I-N-G-H, and this is not an indictment. Everybody calm down on a particular group. I would say that person's name, whether it was Smith or Jones or anything else, but he was found in the room. There's questions about his citizen status or maybe no status at all, and found in the room with 4 or 5 minors. And I'm not talking about people who work underground. I'm talking about what we would call children. One of the girls was intoxicated. What was he doing in that hotel room with these minors? And it only got reported from 2 local news agencies, actually one of which I've done some news items with before. They're a good agency. And mainstream media completely ignored it. This is very significant. So let's keep an eye on that story. And I want just to remind you, with the power of an email, fire off an email to CBC, ask why they did not report it all on that. Okay, so that's tuning us up for what we're going to be seeing and talking about today in some other areas, looking at Iran, one of the small boats, because most of the Iranian Navy, as we know, has actually been sunk to the bottom of the sea, but they still have these small, fast boats. One of them been firing on a ship and has apparently taken a ship under custody. Trump has said now the U.S. is going to blow out of the water any even of these small boats, but it is a concern. And there's been a significant development here. And again, mainstream media don't like reporting on this. I've said before, I disagree with many of Trump's policies. I don't agree with everything, certainly don't agree with tariffs. But if somebody does something that's working and it's positive, it should be noted. Not very much coverage on the fact that Iran has agreed not to execute 8 women that were scheduled to be executed. That's just the really tip of the iceberg in terms of what the Iranian regime is doing. And it wasn't the Pope who intervened for the women, it was Trump. And they have agreed, the Iranian government has agreed not to execute these 8 women. Remember, this story really started from X, and mainstream media, of course, was down on the fact that people were reporting on X that these women were about to be executed. They said this is all exaggeration. The beautiful Ayatollahs in their regime would never want to do such nasty things. And in fact, it was found out to be true, and now the execution has been put off. So give a thumbs up there on that particular movement. Also, with the order from the U.S. to shoot now even any small boats that are out there cruising around the Strait of Hormuz and kill people who are on those boats, because it looks like there will be some increased safety. Remember yesterday we talked about major outlets are now just talking about what we've been talking about for a few days, about a split in the Iranian regime, the hardliners and the so-called moderates. I say the word moderate very carefully because an Iranian regime moderate is like an extreme fanatic also, just not as quite as completely insane as the ones who are in control now. That's the IRGC, seems to be in control. But the countries in the Middle East that want, and all the countries do, that want Iranians, the Iran nuclear program shut down, are feeling confident enough that Saudi Arabia has announced they're going to go ahead with their WWE event. This is a worldwide wrestling event, and of course, you know, President Trump is big on those. So is it a sign from the private sector that they think there's going to be stability? They're going ahead with a huge event coming up this summer, and we'll see if, in fact, that holds out to be true. So keep watching these ongoing deliberations in Iran. Well, the United Kingdom has just, in their parliament, passed a lifelong smoking ban. And what they're doing, they're introducing it, first of all, to people who are less than majority age, so 18, 19-year-olds. It starts with them, but every year it's going to move up. So this is kind of breakthrough stuff. New Zealand did it a few years ago, and then later on in 2023, another government reversed it. But big time stuff here. And look, I'm going to say I'm not a big fan of government intervention in a lot of things, but this is certainly going to help parents who want their kids and they're insisting their kids shouldn't be smoking by saying, look, it's illegal. It's illegal to actually even sell or smoke the stuff. So, and they're putting a ban on it, on smoking. We're going to see if that continues to transpire. Apparently, there's some Canadian member of Parliament looking at that. We don't know. Well, for the last couple of days, I was talking about a situation in Virginia where they were redrawing the maps. If you go to yesterday and the day before, I won't go into the same detail, but redrawing the electoral maps in a way that would give huge benefit to Democrats, basically moving around the voting population. And that won because it had to go to a vote, and they won the vote, but it was very narrow vote. The heavy urban center, which concentrated a lot of the votes, was able to just eke out the number of votes that were happening around in smaller cities. And it was just a reminder, folks and people, if you have whatever your issue is, small c conservatives especially, it is important to vote. People say, well, we've lost a lot of ground. No, we've given up a lot of ground on local initiatives, things that are happening with your city, things that are happening on the provincial or state level. Get out there and vote on these things. Anyway, the Democrats were celebrating hugely because they said this artificial way of gaining more seats in their House of Representatives was in fact struck down yesterday by a Virginia court who said it was unconstitutional to do this. Now that will be challenged in court. Former President Barack Obama was very embarrassed about this because he'd been promoting this change. It's going to go to court, probably going to work its way all up to the Supreme Court. So please, folks, keep remembering it's important to vote on local issues and state and provincial issues. Well, two really blockbuster crime reports coming out. One, the first from the city of Memphis, and they put in place just a little over a year ago what they call the Memphis Safe Task Force. And it's based on controlling crime by increasing great visibility of increase in police officers on the street and really going after and asking the courts to deal with the various crimes that are being committed. It was quite extensive. In a year, they did 7,400 arrests in Memphis. Memphis is hugely, unfortunately, high crime reporting area. And the drop in crime in the last year is just off the chart. How much crime of all levels, violent crime, robberies, break-in. So proving the city of Memphis proved that by increased enforcement, increased presence, and thankfully they have common sense judges who are actually finding these people guilty, huge drop in crime. That actually goes in line with Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C., with their recent report now saying crime is down from 2024 approximately 29%, especially in the area of violent crime. Remember, City of Washington did the same things. In fact, Trump there deployed the National Guard in Washington, D.C. with an increased presence. So if local city councilors are looking for issues that work and that taxpayers and safety-minded citizens like, don't listen to the left. Don't listen to the whiners who say we're being nasty to people who want to smash into your houses. This, in fact, helps them. A lot of those people are actually on trying to get off of drugs. They're breaking in because they're addicted. The best thing for them is to get into a prison facility, even for a short period of time, and have the opportunity to break free from their drugs. So interesting to watch that happening. Now, that's in strict contract to something that happened yesterday where former leader of what's called the Red Scorpion Gang, and he's very well known. His last name is Bacon. I'm using the word man. I was going to say gentleman. He's not a gentleman. But he was found guilty of masterminding what's called the Surrey Six murders. That was back in 2007 when a hitman was sent to take out a competing drug rival. When the hitman got to the apartment there in Surrey, there were a number of innocent people in the apartment, and also there's people, electrician and others working just in the area, and the insane killer shot and killed 6 people, laid them down on the floor, put bullets into their heads, and the person who who organized the whole thing was given 18 years in jail, started the sentence in September of 2020, and he's now out. So Canada taking a little different approach in terms of how we're handling these things. Well, there was we've been talking, there's been a lot of talking in the last few days in Canadian media about the Prime Minister's message on Sunday. He sent out this message that basically saying Canada was just the best in the world in everything in terms of economics and comparing with the G7. And every day in media, there have been reports that not just criticize, but show that it appears that the facts he was using, the Prime Minister was using, were just straight out wrong. The C.D. Howe Institute, and I'm going to say that in conjunction with other media sources, in conjunction with the Bank of Canada, put out their report with a very dismal look at housing in Canada, and whether it's in Vancouver or in Toronto, and in fact pointing out that in the 1980s, the average first-time home buyer was 24 years old. Last year, the average full-time first-time home buyer was 40 years old. So people only by the time they're reaching 40 having the means to put together enough for a down payment. Now, I want to say something here. Also, we've seen people putting off getting married and having kids. So that, they're still doing that, obviously, in very good numbers, but that also puts off the pressure to buy a home. So I'm weaving that into it. But the reports of Prime Minister Carney, saying it's just wonderful, it's never been better for young people. In fact, the economic reports are showing it's never been worse. People defaulting on their mortgages also, that has increased at a very significant rate. And this is alarming statistics coming out, and it just underlines the fact that we've tried to make this a fact to many of you on this show, that I know people laugh at this, but you do have to do the research. You do have to look into things that are being taught to us or told to us, because you do this by, in fact, looking at other news sources. You can't always just look to one source. If you are, in fact, getting your news entirely from the CBC, you are going to be intellectually impaired, because they give a certain news broadcast and news perspective based on their culturally Marxist views of the universe. Good to check them out, but also check out other sources that aren't as hopelessly biased as is the CBC. And so we're seeing some significant challenges to the Prime Minister's message. Also, along with that, yes, it's true that Canadians visiting the U.S., that number has dropped, but it depends on the state you're looking at. In 2025, yes, there were a lower number overall, but Florida's share of Canadian travel to the U.S. actually increased 19.8% in terms of market share. That's up from 16.8% in 2024. So Florida is sort of outperforming the overall U.S. market, and it seems that Canadians are returning, and we're watching to see if this is in fact getting to be common in other states. Also, maybe some of the Canadians shifting to Mexico, and huge reports of the violence that's taking place there, along with the somewhat disturbing continued reports of the effect of gastrointestinal difficulties. Let's just leave it with that so many experience in Mexico. You might want to try this little fun quiz I do when I'm talking to friends who go to Mexico. And hey, I love Mexico. and Mexican, there's some good stuff going on in Mexico. But I talk to people who come back, and usually conversation goes like this: I say, "Hey, how was the holiday?" And they say, "Great." And I say, how is it? Did you get any illness, or how's your tummy?" And, "Oh, no, it was good, it's good." And, "Oh, so nothing." And then they go, "Well, no, I had diarrhea for 3 days after I got back." Or, "Yeah, we had a little bout while we were down there." Listen, I'm just saying, let's just be realistic about what's happening and taking place. And if it's a problem, take the necessary medications with you to make sure you protect against it. We travel a lot in the U.S. I haven't had any of that problem. But anyway, as you like and as you wish. Also in the state of Florida, the Democrat representative here. Now we're seeing this happening in a number of cases, and it's largely, but not totally, with Democrat representatives. It's Sheila McCormick from Florida. She had been was being investigated, and about to be going before an ethics committee in the state of Florida relative to the suggestion, that she had been and was somehow being enriched by millions of dollars in terms of how different programs were being applied in Florida. And just literally moments before she was to go into this committee to be asked the questions, she says she's resigning, and she has resigned. She says it's just a witch hunt. She's not going to have any part of it. The other benefit to resigning is then you don't get investigated. So we're seeing a little more of this pattern happening in the U.S. Let's keep an eye on that particular situation. And we're also seeing in the world of technology some pretty stunning stuff going on. There was just at a basketball game that just took place, the Toyota company brought out their 7'2" robot. And because they've been watching, you've probably seen some of these robots doing free throws from the line, like at halftime to show how good they are. So pretty amazing stuff. And there are many fans to watch this particular robot. This one's called CUE7, so Q7. And so it stands up there, starts from a seated position, dribbles the ball, goes out to the free throw line, boom, pops it in there. And of course, everybody goes crazy, and it's wonderful. The interesting thing here, previously, every time you program a robot to do a new task, whether it's shoot from a basketball or wash your dishes at home, you have to retrain it every time you want it to do something different. So they could have they had robots going out there and shooting, let's say, from the free throw line. But if you wanted it to shoot from another line, or in fact to use a different throw, one-handed or two-handed, you had to go into the very expensive process of reprogramming it. This particular robot, what has caught people's attention, it's called that Q7 has, is called reinforcement learning. So it's now able, they got the robots, they're able to learn as they go, so to speak. So it goes out there, makes a shot, doesn't make it, it doesn't have to be reprogrammed. It can learn from its mistakes. I wish some of us as humans could do that. So remarkable new development, reinforcement learning is taking place. Well, we were just talking about people who are under pressure, and in Canada, NDP Leah Gazin is continued to be under pressure. It's gone international because she's been coining a new phrase, not just LGBT, LGBTQ, LGBT2S1A, her new phrase, and we've talked about this. I'm just talking about it again because it's getting huge international attention, even on the left, saying she's gone a bit too far, and that some legitimate groups like LGBTQ who have some concerns are sort of getting buried. And her the new lineup here is the groups that are not being sufficiently attended to politically are the MMIWG2SLGBTQQIA+. And she says this very seriously, and that anybody who thinks this is funny or strange is just a bigot. So she's kind of getting international attention on that particular one. Well, Canada and the Canadian government is so, is intent on showing we can do anything the Americans can. There just needs to be scrutiny in terms of the dollars that are being spent as we try and do that. If there's a program that's going well somewhere, should we be part of it? The Artemis space, the lunar program, the shot to the moon, is a great example of Canadian being included there. And as you know, we go way back, the Canadarm, which was used on one of the spacecraft. And so working in conjunction with the U.S. seems to be an inexpensive way to get in on that ride, to benefit hugely from all of the breakthroughs there with a minimal amount of investment. But now the Canadian government is determined to be putting, I guess, to be going to the moon themselves. And they've awarded a $200 million, apparently, contract to Spaceport, Nova Scotia. Listen, nothing against the good folks in the program there in Nova Scotia, but what they've got there is basically a launch pad, a concrete pad. There's only 2 rockets been fired from it, and one of them, according to media sources, was a rocket that was built by a university rocket club. Hey, listen, I have no problem with university kids building rockets. The other benefit they're getting apparently in the contract, you might want to look at this, $50,000 a day is going to Spaceport, Nova Scotia. Good for them. $50,000 a day because that they're getting from the federal government because they have a concrete pad that has launched 2 rockets. So you may want to look at some entrepreneurial approaches there. In the world of drugs, and what we would say was one time illegal drugs and now recreational drugs, in the U.S., they've now said, and President Trump has taken some of the provisions off of that have been there on marijuana, and he wants some more study on the health benefits of marijuana. He's also taken some advice and gone with removing the legal impairments to a couple of actually LSD related drugs. Now, that does not mean everybody can run out and start doing LSD legally, but there is something that is called the micro use of certain hallucinogens, which apparently is having quite an effect on people who have long-term addiction problems, be it alcohol or drugs. And it's been very difficult to see if these, in fact, are effective because of the laws against them. Trump taking the laws, in fact, off of those 2, those drugs. We'll see where that goes. Well, there's a group in the United States, very well known, called the Southern Poverty SPLC, Southern Poverty Legal Group. And they have, in fact, been involved over the years in what they do is they find people, quite rightly, that racist groups, be it the KKK or others, they go to their fundraisers and they say, give us money. We have found this out and we'll deal with any companies or anybody who deals with those. Quite rightly, racist groups should be found out, but they're under a lot of heat now being investigated because it's been found that they've actually been giving money to certain racist groups and racist individuals. This is what's being alleged, who are then reporting, then they get the money they've paid, then these people make their outlandish statements, be they KKK or whatever, and then the SPLC can go back to their donors and say, look, we have found even more. So they're being investigated because, in fact, to do some of their work, they've been paying extremely racist people, allegedly, to make outlandish statements, which, again, makes their case and helps them, to do their fundraising. So we're watching that increase. And are there other groups, left-leaning or conservative groups, who pay their enemies to say outrageous stuff so they can go out there and collect money? The state of Texas, the courts in Texas just ruled, it is a landmark ruling, because the posting of the 10 Commandments in public schools was largely thrown out of public schools in the 60s. It was deemed to be not right and against people's rights. You were shoving religion down their throats, apparently. And the courts now have ruled in Texas that it is not a violation of the Constitution to have in a classroom the posting or the list of the 10 Commandments. I wouldn't think that would be. You're not telling people have to follow them. You're not saying it's a particular religion. That's what the court has ruled. So kind of a landmark ruling there. So people who don't like the fact that the 10 Commandments are out there, or that the 10 Commandments are real, are reeling on that one. I want to just say also that the benefits, remember at the start of the podcast here, I said the benefits of raising an issue, even as an individual, do not discount it. Now, Amazon, which is, of course, a gigantic company, and I use them myself, I love their business model, but they've caved under pressure of left-wing groups, and they'll remove certain books from their own availability files and from their own libraries so that you can't buy them. If these left-wing groups do some phone calls and protest and say, hey, this book is racist or this book is whatever, okay, fine, they're a private company, they can do that. So there's one case is very interesting on a book that's called The Camp of the Saints. The Camp of the Saints. It's produced by Vauban Books. Now, I haven't read it, but apparently it's a novel. It's fictitious, but because of the fact of its subject matter, it was taken off of the shelves of Amazon because it portrays an actual plan. It portrays the massive invasion of countries by illegal immigration, and people who want legal, who don't worry about illegal immigration. A lot of these groups that are wanting to flood the borders with illegal immigrants, they began to call into Amazon and say, take that racist book off the shelves. And so they did. Amazon did. Then some other people started looking and reading the book and they say, hey, it's a novel. There's some satire in it, and it's talking about a massive plan to flood countries with illegal immigrants. And really, it just started from a few people phoning in and saying to Amazon, why did you pull that? And then that kind of thing goes up the line when these companies get the phone call, and they have put the Camp of the Saints back on the shelves, proving that years ago when people would complain about books and book titles, that will often give you a boost in the sales of your books. But I'm raising this to show that you as an individual and a few individuals making calls in the right way can actually have an effect on the animated movie about David that came out from Angel Studios. My wife and I went and saw the movie. Great movie, very historically accurate, even in terms of the different tribes that were involved in some of the wars in ancient Israel. There was one scene that I just didn't understand. It's noted, it's a historical fact that David was a shepherd before he was a king. And in the biblical version, there's one point at which he actually kills a lion that was raiding the sheep and killing the sheep. But in the movie, it shows that he wrestles the lion, tosses the lion over the cliff, and then when he sees the lion is stuck in a rock, I guess between a rock and a hard place, David goes down and rescues the lion. Listen, that was not in the Bible at all. Now, I recognize that the producers maybe didn't want kids to be seeing a lion killed. I get that. Then just don't put that in. Just consider it age appropriate, but don't listen to those of you who are making movies and you're calling them religiously or factually based on the Bible. Don't go adding stuff that isn't in the Bible. It's a great movie without that. I fired off an email to Angel Studios, and within 3 days, I got a very good reply back. It was not AI generated. It thanked me and said they're going to take a look at how they do that. You know, the movie Noah, because I want to close here about Noah's Ark. A story there, but my wife and I went and saw that. It was a number of years ago, and we thought, oh, this is cool. Let's see what it talks about, the historicity of Noah's Ark. There was a pile of stuff in there that was not in the biblical account, even to the point of they had somebody stowing away on Noah's Ark, and it was kind of comical, but it wasn't in the Bible. So if you're making a movie about the Bible or purporting that it's about biblical truth, make it accurate. There's enough fantastic, amazing, and stunning stuff in the Bible that Hollywood or any other studio doesn't have to beef it up. And that brings us to the close here, where we're seeing that, by the way, I talked about, I remember there was a lot of media coverage on the Israeli soldier who was seen axing a statue of Jesus. This is when they were doing their attacks on the Hezbollah camps in Lebanon. The two soldiers now, the Israeli government has come out very strongly against them. They're being fully disciplined, and the Israeli government is actually helping to fund reconstruction of what was destroyed. So pretty amazing. You have a Jewish government helping to rebuild a Christian statue of types. And this, again, what I've said many times about Israel. Israel is not apartheid. Israel allows freedom of religion. Israel does not allow women to be subjugated to laws making them lesser. Israel allows free expression of your orientation. Israel is the only, in fact, country in the entire Middle East that is not apartheid. Just wanted to give you an update on that particular situation. But another research group is looking in Turkey. Now, the first story came out about a boat-shaped geological formation as far back as 1959. I can remember even as a kid, later in the 60s as I was getting older, reading about this. Nothing was really followed up. The Turkish government didn't want people looking any further at it, but it's called the I want to get this right, Duru Pinar Formation. It's located in Turkey, not far from where the Bible says the ark landed on Mount Ararat. And now using devices that can, as you know, measure and look at what's going, soil penetrating, earth penetrating devices, there's just a report, I'm not saying yay or nay, there seems to be some kind of formation quite far below the surface, and it's in the same dimensions, fits the same dimensions as described in the Old Testament. Folks, who knows, but interesting looking at what they're finding. Thanks for tuning in today, and we'll catch you tomorrow. Bye now.